Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here, welcome back to another Division video. It's the weekend, which of course means it is time to talk about the weekly vendor reset. What is for sale, is it worth buying, all that stuff. So if you guys do enjoy this, you do find it helpful, then a like would be super appreciated. Any questions, drop them down below. But let's get started. So first up, starting in the terminal, as always, speaking to the special equipment vendor, it is worth checking these out because while they do have a kind of core fixed talent that is exclusive to that weapon, they do also have rotating talents. So going through those very quickly, you do of course have the Liberator with responsive and prepared. This is of course one of those choice things. You wouldn't keep both of them because they contradict each other, but you would roll out the one that you would find more applicable. So generally speaking, given the kind of recoil and whatnot, I would use this a lot closer. So get rid of prepared, go with that. You have Pakan with Meticulous and Capable. You have Cassidy with Swift and Ferocious. You also have Centurion with Expert and Competent, of course, plus the perk that goes with the Liberator. And you have Historian with Competent, Determined, and of course its main talent. Moving on from there, you have a Rhino Special, of course the one that you can put a sight on with Expert and Proficient. You have an MP7, which is rather interesting. MP7s are, of course, a model that people have been going after. They're very, very good in Last Stand, especially when it's normalized. This one has Skilled, Competent, and Dominant, so yes, not a great set of talents. So great model, not the perfect set of talents. You could probably grab this if you want to test out an MP7, because again, don't forget in Last Stand, because of the normalized environment, there is a certain degree of forgiveness, so you can kind of mess around with it, at least sort of see if you like it, because this does have a very high fire rate. You rip through your magazine very fast, so to some people it might not necessarily be your cup of tea, but you could take this and say roll out Dominant, so you can at least have something in the free slot. You could get some value out of Competent. Yes, you do have to spec a little bit more into electronics, and Skilled is never a bad talent, it's just a little bit hard to unlock, so unless you're kind of electronics focused. But either way, for those of you guys that want to at least test out an MP7, maybe consider picking it up, just know that it's not going to be a great roll. You also have Military P416, Destructive, Talented and Skilled, a Marine Super 90, Unforgiving, Sustained and Brutal, a Hunting M44, Vicious, Determined and Accurate, and a Classic M60, Predatory, Sustained and Deadly. Usual kind of things, scrolling through here, just kind of highlighting the high ends. Of course, for the gear set side of things, you're going to want to check these out for yourself, but for those of you guys that want to at least kind of pick out some of these, because high-end builds are, making a kind of comeback these days. I do see them quite a lot, which is actually pretty cool to see. So of course, going through these in case you guys do need to pick up some of them, then you do have these options. As for your mods, Prototype Firearms mod with plus 3% skill haste. Again, reminder that skill haste is, of course, an important skill to go after. So if you haven't necessarily got it, then do at least consider looking for it. I don't necessarily run it on, say, my mods. I typically try and go for it more so on my gear, but either way, something to call out. And a Prototype Performance mod with Smart Cover Damage Resilience. Then moving over to the Advanced Weaponry Vendor, again another Rhino Special, so again another option to put a sight on that, Expert and Proficient, a Tactical AUG A3P with Ferocious, Dominant and Accurate, a Scar L with Adept, Ferocious and Responsive, a Double Barrel Shotgun with Swift, Self-Preserved and Talented, an M700 Carbon with Sustained, Cool-Headed and Elevated, and a Military MK46 with Adept, Unforgiving and Meticulous. Nothing I would especially call out there, a couple of interesting models, but no particular sort of standout weapons. Then moving over to the weapons vendor in the main hall of the base operations, there is an MP5 ST here. Again, not perfect, but it does have a workable roll. So you would probably want to roll out Dominant in this situation. Determined isn't too bad. Predatory, a bit of a pain to unlock, but again, not too bad. Roll out Dominant, get something in the free slot, and you can have something to work with here. This is, of course, another decent SMG. MP5s tend to be a lot more common than MP7s, so you do see a lot of people running with them in things like Last Stand. So again, something to consider if you don't have an MP5. Then moving over to the safe houses, starting off in the Wolves Den safe house, you actually have an LVOA-C for sale. This is definitely one of those weeks where you need to sort of keep an open mind because some of the talents aren't necessarily great, but you can work with some of these. LVOA-C, again, a very nice model, something to consider using in PvP. It does have Fierce, Unforgiving, and Destructive. So in this situation, I would either roll out Fierce or I would roll out Destructive, depending on kind of how you want to use the weapon. Destructive is, of course, the easy one to roll out because no matter what goes in there, is completely free, so I'd probably lean more towards that. Just bear in mind the kind of discrepancy between the unlock for Fierce and Unforgiving. If you're specking towards, say, like firearms and stamina, you're probably not going to be there for electronics, so you're going to need to kind of work out how you unlock it. Either way, if you're lacking an LVOA-C and you want one, then there is one on sale this week. Moving on from there to the Dante's Run safe house, just scrolling down to the very bottom, there's a quick mod I want to kind of talk about, Prototype Performance mod. This has plus 5.5% First Aid Self-Heal. That can go a little bit higher, you can get one of those at 6%, but for the time being, if you guys are lacking these, then of course, in light of the fact that First Aid isn't of course as good unless you spec heavily into skill power, then of course you can get a little bit more out of it if you do stack self-heal mods. So these are things worth hanging on to, worth getting if you don't have them. So again, look at your inventory, see what you've got, and if you're missing them, then do consider picking up a few. Then turning your attention to Madison Stand Safehouse, there is actually a firearms mod down here. Just going to scroll into it very quickly. This has plus health on it, so of course if you guys are trying to stack health, and of course you're going for a more firearms focused build, then of course this could have value for you. So if you're missing any of those, then do again consider picking those up. Then after that, turning your attention to the Dark Zone gear vendors, starting off in DZ02. Ones worth calling out here are the Reckless chest piece. Of course, if you guys do want these, also has health on kill and enemy armor damage. Plus, there is a resourceful backpack. So again, if you guys are running any sort of shield-focused build, then that can of course use the healing to apply to your skill objects. So again, very useful. Then moving over to DZ03 for your weapons, Police 686 Magnum with Expert and Toxic, a Vector 45 ACP with Competent, Determined and Brutal. Again, you could make that one work if you keep Brutal because that's decent talent. You could then roll out Determined for a much more useful skill, and you could then have a decent Vector. But of course, do bear in mind, with an MP5 and an MP7 on sale, then I would much rather go for those weapons than I would a Vector. But again, it's something to consider. Classic AK-47 with Capable, Intense and Unforgiving, a Super 90 with Responsive, Predatory and Capable, an M700 Carbon with Ferocious, Determined and Elevated, and an Infantry MG5 with Commanding, Talented and Deadly. And then after that, turning our attention to the DZ06 safe room, of course looking through the usual gear pieces, so a Banshee Shadow Mask, you also have a Vest of the Nomad, Backpack of the Nomad, we have Banshee Shadow knee pads, a Firecrest holster, and finally a Tactician's Authority pair of gloves. Then turning your attention to the Dark Zone checkpoints next, we're going to stop off in East 34th Street. It seems to be like the week of SMGs this time around, so we might as well continue that theme. There's a PP19 here with Unforgiving, Accurate, and Hurried. Of course, PP19 typically more useful in PvE, but you can still get some mileage out of it in PvP, especially in Last Stand, so Unforgiving can actually be a pretty decent talent. You could then roll out one of these two talents instead. PP19 can actually get some value out of Hurried, so you could drop Accurate, get something decent in there, and actually make something out of this weapon. And that, my friends, is pretty much it. I took a stop at the other vendors, there wasn't really anything massively inspiring, so for the time being, that is everything you need to know about. Now, this week, there are a few kind of select SMGs you can consider. There definitely aren't any sort of god rolls, so to speak, but there are a few weapons that if you have a slightly open mind, you can definitely make them work, or at least if you want to try out something different in Last Stand, then you can test out some different archetypes. So I'd say definitely try and consider grabbing the MP7, consider grabbing the MP5 if you don't have one, maybe that LVOA-C if you're missing that model, and then you could have some decent things to mess around with. But for the time being, that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Any questions, drop them down below. And thanks for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.